Fauna.
Is it time to learn about the ceremony?
Yes. And if there's time, I'll tell you what it means to be Naema.
And then tomorrow I can find out about the egg?
Yes, but only if I have enough time.
I'll be extra quiet.
Hmm. Well, after my Naema had hid the egg in its new cave, she swam back to find a large rock. And she took that rock and she began carving it to look exactly like the egg of Livor. And when she was finally done, she placed that egg shaped rock in her cave along with the rest of her gifts. Now, Naema knew that Hael worked quickly, and so the ceremony would be ready soon. So she called her sisters to help her ready herself. Now, my Naema's hands were bloodied from all of her digging, and of course her carving. So she had used the herb that had healed her fin, and then she wrapped her hands and hid them with layers of jewels. Her sisters were of course curious and asked about her hands, and they asked why she wanted to be Hael's equal after what he had done to Livor. And so she told them everything. She told them where she hid the egg, how she hid the egg, how she replaced the egg with a rock, and finally, she told them of her plan of becoming Hael's equal, so to gain his wisdom and bring back life to Livor's egg. Her sisters listened and nodded their head in approval of her plan, and they swore their secrecy and their allegiance. The Mato wanted their sister Livor back, and if lying to Hael was how to get her back, they would do it, no matter the fear he instilled in them. So they continued helping Naema prepare herself for the ceremony, and they had fun doing it. They adorned her with all the jewels Hael had given her. On her head she wore a clear crown made with a gemstone similar to diamond. Around her neck she wrapped a blue weed from the seabed, and on her chest she wore a jeweled ribbed-shaped vest with colors of pink and green. Her waist was adorned with yellow weeds, and on her hips her sisters wrapped the luminous rope that was once the hair of the News, and on it they hung the remainder of the red and orange gemstones. My Naema looked magical, mystical, and radiant, but just like the rainbow gases that killed Sparrow and her planet, it was just a pretty spectacle and meant nothing.
You're such a pessimist.
And I thought you said you'd be extra quiet. Soon after Naema was all decorated, she was called upon by Hael. This time he wished to meet her at a place they had never before met. It was at a lake, and the water there was a clear blue-green, and it was surrounded by lush vegetation. Naema and her sisters swam as close to the lake as they could, but it was separated from the sea by an abundant portion of land. And this is what marked the beginning of the ceremony. You see, to become Naema, you must first bleed for the land. You must sweat for the land, and you must shed tears upon it.
Blood, sweat, and tears? Really?
Silence, Fauna. Naema was tasked in creating a passage to the lake. Now, my Naema looked around and saw all the greenery, and she saw how beautiful it was, and she didn't want to ruin it. So instead, She did what she had already become accustomed to. She began digging an undersea tunnel, and this time she moved much faster.
Was it because of the jewels on her hands?
It was. The jewels were strong, and they made for great rock crushers. And before long, a tunnel leading from the sea to the lake was created. Naima was quite pleased with herself, as were her sisters. But Hayel seemed discontented. Aleta, you have completed a task that would make another not only sweat. He wiped her brow and sniffed, uncertain as to whether it was sweat or salt water, but also bleed. He held her uninjured hands, protected by the jewels. And as far as tears, all I can see is a smile. He caressed her lips with his thumb. For the ceremony to be complete, I am sorry, Aleta, for what I am about to do. Hayel then grabbed her by her hair and pulled her out of the water. Then he held her down and began to squeeze. At first she was confused, but then she felt a shift inside her body, like something had come loose. And then she screamed, and she fought against the object moving inside her. But she was not as strong as Hayel, and eventually from out of her was squeezed an egg. Her egg. You see, Fauna, every Mato carries in her an egg. It is meant to replace her if she dies.
Like a child?
Similar. Now, Naima lay on the ground, exhausted and covered in sweat, and weak from the blood loss. And she watched Hayel as he placed the egg in front of her and said, "If you wish to be queen, you must first show me that you have the will to rise from your suffering over and over again. Break the egg and eat it all."
Did she eat it?
Yes,
All of it?
yes.
And then what?
Well, then she suffered, and she endured, and then she rose covered in the tear-drenched soil of her land, and she went back to the sea, where she waited for Hayel's orders. Because that is the duty of Naima, to suffer, to obey, and to rise again to suffer some more.
I don't want to be Naima.
You have time before you must make your decision. But if you choose not to defeat me and take my place, then I will have to kill you and continue to be Naima myself.
Naima? At the ceremony? At your ceremony? What made you cry?
Fauna, I was nourished with sadness. I was raised with pain. I have never known a reason to smile or be happy. So, for my ceremony, Hayel did something quite cruel. I had a son once, but I was not a good mother. Nurturing is not in my nature. And so I never told him that I loved him. At my ceremony, Hael let me see my son one last time. My boy had been dead for many years. He'd been murdered by the news for not being pure of heart. So they stabbed him in his heart and in his neck and in his torso over and over again. And I was too slow. I was too lazy to save him. I thought he was weak, so I let him die. He was only a child, barely the height of my womb, and I expected too much from him. And so at the ceremony, as I stood over the dead body of my Naima, I looked up to see him, my son, standing in front of Hael, smiling and calling my name,
Mama?
reaching his little fingers for me. But when I tried to run towards him, I could not move. I was held in place, unable to move even a finger. And so I watched as the look of betrayal crept over his face, and he was turned away from me and swallowed by Vod.
I'm Naima. I will take your place as Naima. I think you've suffered enough. I will kill you, I promise.
Thank you, Fauna.
Sweet dreams, Naima.